In part one, I left you with two things that don't make sense together. One, that oud is the most expensive raw material in all of perfumery, and two, it doesn't even grow in Arabia. And sitting right in the middle of those two facts is my less than $20 bottle of opulent oud. You have the most expensive material, not just in Middle Eastern fragrance, but in perfumery period, from a tree that never grows in Arabia, but is the center of all Middle Eastern perfumery, in a bottle that cost me less than much. When you add those things up, technically none of that should be possible. So that's what we're going to spend this part exploring. What oud actually is, where it comes from, and how that bottle ends up on our shelves for less than $20. But first, this is Arabian Scent Files, the only fragrance series that treats Middle Eastern perfumery as a subject worth studying, not just a place to find cheap alternatives. Every episode goes deeper than the bottle. I'm Zoba, let's get into it. Oud is actually a wound. There is a tree, pale wood, smells like nothing special. But every now and then it gets infected. A mold, a fungus of some type gets into the wood, and the tree does what any living thing does when something attacks it. It fights back. It floods the wound with a dark, heavy resin to protect itself. And that resin, the stuff the tree makes to survive being attacked, ends up being oud. That is oud. That dark, infected, resin-soaked wood is the most precious material in perfumery. Essentially, a tree's scar tissue is the most precious material in perfumery. And it doesn't happen to most trees. In the wild, only a tiny number of them ever get infected and make oud. Some estimates put it as low as 2 in every 100, so we're talking 2% here. So let's stack it up again. A tree that grows far from Arabia, that only turns to oud when it happens to get sick. And of the trees, it only happens to 2% of them. This is what forms the basis, or is the center of Middle Eastern perfumery. So let's talk about cost. Pure oud oil distilled from that infected wood, very expensive, the most expensive, not the one-off, the most expensive perfumery material. There are other materials like rose, for example, real rose. They're not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to oud, definitely much cheaper. So for example, rose might be in the low thousands of dollars per kilo, while top grade oud oil runs into the tens of thousands. So there is basically nothing in a perfumer's whole kit that lives up there in terms of price, except maybe ambergris, but we'll dive into that in a later episode. Now, you often hear people say oud is worth more than gold. And for a significant period of time, gram for gram, the finest oud actually rival gold. These days, gold is so expensive that, oud is not as expensive as gold is today. But it makes it easier to wrap your head around how expensive oud is when you're comparing it to gold. So that's why you often hear that. But now we've talked about what it costs. How about where it grows? Where does oud grow? Where does the tree actually grow? The tree is called Aquilaria, and it does not grow in Arabia. It's native to South and Southeast Asia, so countries like India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, even southern China. That's where you will find the Aquilaria tree. And if you look at that list of countries, there isn't a single one of them that's in the Middle East. So again, just to keep emphasizing, the ingredient we call the soul of Arabian perfume, the note that says Arabia or Middle Eastern louder than any other, comes from rainforests thousands of miles away from the Middle Eastern region. The tree grows in the monsoon jungle, not in desert conditions. So how on earth did it become the heart of Arabian fragrance? And the answer is the ocean. So for thousands of years, there were trade routes running across the Indian Ocean, and the winds out there, the monsoon wind, flip direction with the seasons. So sailors had to learn how to ride the winds. One half of the year, they would go out with the wind and they could not come back until the other half of the year when it flipped direction, and they would ride the winds back the other way. And on those routes, goods moved between the Middle East, the coast of India, and all the way to China. I remember in episode 1 when we talked about the incense route. Arabia was already famous for sending things out on those routes. So frankincense, myrrh, the incense the whole ancient world was going crazy for was already going from Arabia to the east. And then when it was coming back, when the ships were coming back, what was coming back the other way was wood. By around the 7th century, Arab traders were bringing wood home in a serious way. There is an old Arabic record of merchants sailing from Basra in what is now Iraq all the way to China and back. And this is a round trip that could take 2 years. 2 years through storm, through shipwrecks, through pirates, just so that they could get wood or oud. And when early Arabic texts wrote about this ingredient, they had a name for it. They called it oud al-Hindi, so Indian oud. And I love that because they named it after India, the place they were getting it from. They were not pretending they invented it, which is something we see all the time. Either a culture, a location, a person gets something from somewhere, and all of a sudden it becomes their own. They invented it. But they called it Indian oud because they imported it, now they treasured it, and they built something significant with it. And what they built formed the bedrock of the fragrance culture that still exists thousands of years later. Once oud arrived to the Middle East, it didn't just become a nice smell. It was deeply embedded in society and their culture. For about 14 centuries now, since that 7th century moment, oud has pretty much sat in the center of Arabian life. The ingredient itself is older, like oud shows up in ancient Egypt, in old Indian texts. So the ingredient is really old, 3,000 years of history easily. But the Arabian love affair with the ingredient, now that's roughly 1400 years. And it runs really deep. If you look at things through a religious lens, in the Islamic tradition, oud holds a sacred place that goes all the way back to the beginning of the religion. It's burned as incense to purify a space before or during prayers. It's valued as medicine. And it lives in the way the religion describes paradise, where paradise has part of the description for paradise is oud burning in the incense burners of the afterlife. And so oud isn't only sacred when it comes to the religion for that region, it's part of hospitality. In the Gulf, you'll find an incense burner in just about every home. You set a piece of wood on the coals and the smoke fills the room. People literally hold their clothes over it so the scent settles into the fabric. And then when a guest arrives, you offer them that smoke. It's a way of saying you're welcome, I honor you. In that region, oud isn't the last thing you dab on before you run out the door. It's part of their identity. It's part of hospitality. It's part of how they curate their homes and their space. It's respect. It's part of how they greet people they love and value. So on that side of things, you have 14 centuries of an ingredient being part of a culture. You have the trade routes, what they went through to make sure they got it. You see the religious significance, the importance it holds in homes. And so when you weigh that against the West, on the Western part of the world, let's call it the Western luxury world, oud was discovered 15, maybe 20 years ago. The big designer perfume houses started putting oud in bottles and selling it as this exotic, mysterious new luxury. New luxury. But oud wasn't new. Might be new in the western part of the world, but it wasn't brand new. The Arab world had been living with the ingredient for 1400 years before on the western side they thought to bottle it. So when you hear oud talked about like it's some trendy designer discovery, remember, no, the rest of the world is just catching up to something the Middle East has known for a very, very long time. So now that we know the cost, we know all the trouble they go through to get it, how does a $14 bottle of oud exist if real oud is the most expensive material in perfumery? The answer is chemistry. Almost no oud you can buy in a sprayable perfume. Yours, mine, anybody's, affordable designer. None of it has rare, distilled, infected wood oil. Almost none of it. What's in the bottle is a recreation. Perfumers take a set of man-made ingredients built to smell like oud, and they blend them into something that gives you that smoky, woody animal richness. They call it an oud accord. And those man-made ingredients are cheap, or relatively cheap compared to the real deal. We're talking about $1 a gram against $30,000 and up per kilo for the real oil. This is not a budget shortcut. Everybody does this. Everyone. This is not cheap perfume houses cutting a corner the expensive perfume houses don't. The luxury bottle does the exact same thing as the affordable bottles do. So that $350 designer oud you've been saving up for is built on the same kind of man-made accord that the $20 bottle of oud is built on. The same suppliers make the ingredients for the whole industry, top to bottom. So when somebody sees an affordable bottle of oud and they're like, well, it has a cheap oud, it has the fake oud, they've got it backwards. It's exactly as real or exactly as fake as a luxury bottle. It's just the more affordable perfume houses keep the markup. A lot of the time, the affordable houses use more of the accord at a higher concentration than the luxury houses, which is why you have those instances where you have a $20 bottle of oud that, in terms of longevity, lasts longer than the one that costs $300, $400. So on the one hand, you're paying a markup for the same ingredient for something that doesn't last as long. On the affordable side, same ingredients, just a lot more budget friendly. Cheap is not the same thing as fake. Affordable is not the same thing as fake. The price tag on the more expensive one is just a luxury markup being exposed. And when we talk about the different pieces of oud, remember my 2 bottles in part 1? Amir Al Oud and Opulent Oud, both of them, the uncle who scared me and the uncle who won me over, they're both built on the same man-made, the same kind of accord. So that the difference is never how real the oud is. The difference is how the oud is treated. On Opulent Oud, it was rose and something else. Essentially, with oud or oud accord, it's what the perfumer builds around it. It's what the artist does with it. So oud is never about how real the ingredient is, because today, it's hardly ever the real deal. Now, real oud oil, the pure distilled kind, it actually still exists. Like there is a whole gorgeous centuries-old world of it. It's called Den, D-E-H-N, Den Al Oud, and it lives in the Attar tradition. It's alcohol-free, oil-based perfume the old way. That world is real, it's breathtaking, and it's really expensive. That's a whole episode of its own. Again, we'll dive into it, but just know that there still exists a space in perfumery and in the world of fragrance where real oud oil is still very much in use. Just know it's super, super expensive. For the bottles most of us are buying and wearing every day, it's the oud accord. And there is no shame in that, none whatsoever. So let's pull everything together. You now know what oud actually is. You know it's a tree's scar tissue formed from a wound. You know where it comes from. It comes from the rainforest in Asia, not the Middle East, not Arabia. You know how it got there, came across an ocean for 1400 years. You know it is treasured so much that they named it for the land it was coming from. And now you know why your affordable bottle of oud is every bit as real as the expensive one. So that's the history of oud. That's the why of oud. In part 3 for this episode, I'm gonna stop talking about oud and we'll explore some bottles. Some of my favorite oud perfumes. I've got a handful of bottles, and every one of them has a different face of the same ingredient. So we're gonna explore together exactly what oud can do. I'll see you there.